All right, I'd like to take a second to just talk to you guys. Thank everybody for the continued support and remind everyone that I've got a lot of projects coming out. I've put out a couple of videos this week, one of them being on indicators. Moving averages is going to be the first one on that series. It's going to be called Indicators 101. Basically, it just takes time to explain how indicators work and how you can implement them into your trading. And I also put out a crypto charting video where I do 5 crypto pairs and I chart them on the weekly, the daily, and the 4-hour, just like I do these Forex pairs. So if that's something that you're interested in, if you have questions about, go ahead and check those videos out. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. Again, thank you for your continued support. I really do appreciate all the support that I've been getting in growing this channel, and I will continue to bring more and more content that you guys want to see. So if you have any recommendations, if you have any questions, if you have anything that you would like me to cover, please by all means drop me a message on Telegram or drop a comment in the comment section down below, and I promise you I will get back to you in a timely manner. So that's all. Thanks again for the continued support, and let's go ahead and get started. Here, back with week number 10 of the weekly charting series, where I go over 10 different pairs, 3 different time frames per pair: the weekly, the daily, and the 4-hour time frame. Just give you a rundown of what I expect for the coming week. Let's go ahead and get started with EUR USD. On the weekly time frame, we can zoom in and see last week's candlestick did end bullish engulfing, but we've had this consolidation going on with EU now for a number of weeks. So I'm staying away from EU until it either breaks this weekly trend line that I've drawn, or if it breaks up above this little trend line, which will be more significant on lower time frames. Then I'll trade it up to the trend line above that. But looking at last week's candlestick, it was slightly bullish engulfing. There is a little bit of a wick to the upside, but like I said, EU has been consolidating. Going over to the daily time frame, so last week's candlesticks, Friday was pretty small. Thursday was a bearish engulfing candle, and then we have Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday all being bullish. As you guys probably know, this week for USD will probably be down this week because of the stuff going on with Syria right now. That usually has a negative impact on the United States economy, and so I would expect for EU to rise this week. That's not always the case. For those of you that don't know how news works, news is just when a news article comes out and you see economic change that's relevant to news, normally what happens, how the charts reflect it, is how people react to the news event, right? And so if the general public and or the business sector react poorly to it, then that's bad for the economy, and therefore it drives the value of the economy's currency down. However, sometimes we see when a news event comes out that would typically be bad for the economy, if the general public and or the business sector were expecting it to be bad, and it wasn't as bad as initially thought, then you can see actually a good economic response to that, because again, it wasn't as bad as the business sector and or the general public were expecting. So you can see, even with negative news, you can see positive rebounds from it because of it was expected to be worse than it really was, and it wasn't as bad as initially thought, even though it is still considered to be bad news or negative news, I guess, negative to the economy. The economy reacts in a different way because it wasn't as negative as previously thought. So, but we didn't have a lot of significant movement on EU last week. As you can see on the daily time frame, we didn't really make up that much ground. We are sitting right on that weekly trend line that I was talking about on the time frame before this, on the weekly. Let's go ahead and drop down to the 4-hour. So on the 4-hour, this is where I'm going to primarily spend most of my time talking about this week, is the 4-hour time frames. With EU, you can see we have the zone above. The zone is based off of this candlestick right here. And then we have these two levels, the trend lines, of course, and then the support and resistance level down here. So what I'm expecting is price has to break out of one of these two sides, this wedge coming up. And with the outlook of USD this week, I'm expecting EU to go bullish, and so I'm looking for either a retest of this trend line up here, if not a retest or a break and a retest, and then continuation upward to the zone. Before I'll trade EU, I want to break out of this consolidation area though that's been going on for a number of weeks now. So I'm staying away from EU this week more than likely, unless we get significant movement to the upside or the downside. But until then, I'm staying away from it. So let's go ahead and transition now into, all right, now looking at USD JPY on the weekly time frame. Last week's candlestick was bullish. However, we did close right on the B point of this Gartley pattern that is drawn, and so I'm not going to say that I'm bullish on this pair this week. I'm not going to say that I'm bearish on this pair this week. I will say that on the lower time frames, what we're wanting to see is we're wanting to see a break and a retest of this B level of the Gartley pattern in order to go bullish, and in order to go bearish, we need a clear rejection of this B level to the downside, and then you can trade it down to this trend line that I have drawn, or vice versa, you can trade it up to the trend line up here if it does go bullish. Dropping down to the daily time frame, let's go ahead and get rid of some of this stuff that's relevant for the 4-hour. So you can see Friday's candlestick close with this this pin bar or spinning top, however you want to refer to it as, that literally closed right on the B point. The day before that, Thursday, was bullish engulfing, and then we had some just ups and downs before that. So price is very well aware that it's at that B point. The previous market structure shows that. So it's just something to be cautious of, if nothing else. Let's take a look at the 4-hour time frame. And this is what I was looking for on the 4-hour time frame. You can see that on Friday we had this huge bearish engulfing candle. Not huge, but a sizable bearish engulfing candle, and it looks like we're getting a retest of that B level. You'll see with the arrows, if that is a retest, then we should get some bullish movement right out of the gate. If it's not, and we get bearish movement, we're looking for a break of this trend line. And so that's what these arrows represent. We're representing either bullish movement right out of the gate, a retest of this trend line before going bullish, and if it does break and retest this trend line and the B level for that matter, then we will be going down and we'll go bearish, and you can trade it down to this trend line right here. But that's what I see with UJ this week. Let's go ahead and move on to gold. All right, looking at gold on the weekly time frame, last week's candlestick was slightly bullish. We did have a large wick to the upside. Much like EU, gold has been consolidating for a number of weeks now as well, and so that's what this area right here is representing, is just an area of consolidation. Much like EU, if the economy reacts poorly to the Syria stuff that's going on right now concerning the United States and, well, honestly the rest of the world, if that does cause some sort of negative economic impact, which I do suspect that it will, then we should see this go bullish this week. That just kind of depends. I'm not 100% sure. Normally with acts of war or attacks by the United States that are very public, that's usually reflected poorly on the United States economy. And so based on what's happened in the past, usually we'll see bullish movement out of this for gold and EU, and we'll see bearish movement out of UJ and all the pairs that start with USD will see bearish movement. All the pairs that end with USD should see bullish movement. Not always, but usually that's how it happens. Again, going back to this, we do have that large wick to the upside. It did end bullish, but it did not break this, not last week's candle, but the week before that bearish candle. Let's go ahead and drop down to the daily time frame. Looking at the daily time frame, we're going to add, we'll add a zone, just because I want to signify this area right here. So we've had all of these rejections to this one area that's not quite up to this level, which is just based off of a previous market structure, that previous high. Looking at last week's candlesticks, much like EU, Friday closed bullish, Thursday was a bearish engulfing candle, and then every other day of the week was bullish, Wednesday being a pretty large bullish candle with a large wick that rejected that area that I was talking about, that zone right there. So I can see this going bullish or bearish this week. If it does go bearish, we're looking for a retest or a break of this this trend line right here. If it goes bullish, we're looking for a breakout of this zone, and preferably a break of the previous market structure, the support and resistance level right here, before coming down, retesting, and completing the butterfly pattern on the weekly. Looking at the 4-hour time frame, you can see Wednesday and Thursday, that bearish movement brought price right back down, and then Friday at noon my time, that would have been the close of that bullish engulfing candle. So the zone on the bottom and the zone on the top represent the consolidation area. Instead of just drawing it in a box, I drew zones above and below. Arrows kind of represent what we need to see either direction. So we're looking for a breakout of the zone, a retest of the zone, and then either a retest of previous market structure or a break of previous market structure. If it is going to go bearish, we're looking for either a retest of this trend line, if not a break and then a retest, and then a continuation downward. So that's what I see with gold this week. Definitely something to be aware of. I do not recommend trading USD pairs straight out of the gate. I do recommend waiting and seeing what happens at market open. I do suspect that we'll have some pretty large gaps this week. And if this does get posted after market open, then I apologize for that. I'm going to try to get it as close to market open as I can. But definitely something to be aware of. So let's go ahead and move on. All right, now we're looking at EUR/AUD. Last week's candlestick did close bearish, rather sizable bearish candlestick, although we did get a retest of this horizontal line right here, the support and resistance level that represents previous market structure, which is this right here. So we're retesting previous market structure right now. It looks like it rejected that pretty well. What we're looking for is a completion of this bat pattern. The completion zone is really, really small, and it almost got there, not last week, but the week before that, but did not quite reach it. So we are still waiting on the completion of the bat pattern before anything else. So last week's candlestick again was pretty strong bearish candle, although we did have a pretty strong rejection of it as well. And that rejection on the daily time frame came on Friday. We came down, retested this market structure, which we can see much more clearly on the daily time frame. We see all these rejections to the same level. Price broke through, and we have this rejection right here. I'm not going to say that this could go. I'm not going to say that I expect for this to go bullish this week, but it is something to definitely be aware of, that if we get the break of this trend line right here to the upside, then we're looking for the completion of the bat pattern. We can trade that. Let's go ahead and drop down to the daily, to the 4-hour time frame. Those of you that follow me on the Telegram channel, the TraderJud Telegram channel, I posted this on Tuesday, I believe, Tuesday or Wednesday last week, which was right after this bearish engulfing candle right here. I told everybody it was something to look out for, and as soon as the neckline was retested, the neckline was tested, got bullish momentum off of the test of that neckline, and then as soon as it broke, that price just disintegrated. down into that level that I was referring to, the previous market structure level. So if you did get in on that, good for you. If you did not, that's even more reason to follow my TraderJud charting Telegram channel. Go ahead and get rid of that so we can look at this more clearly. Again, this is just a wedge pattern. So what we're looking for is, this is a very simple pair to chart up. We're looking for either a break and a retest to the upside, or a break and a retest to the downside. One of those, either one, honestly, is fine. I think that we should probably see a completion of the bat pattern on the weekly time frame, so I'm looking for this to go bullish myself, but I'm always open to the alternative of it going bearish. So I'm what I call a if-then trader, and I wait for price to do whatever it's going to do. If it goes to the upside and retests, then we trade it to the upside. If it breaks down below and retests, then we trade it to the downside. So that's what I see with EA this week. Let's go ahead and move on. All right, GN is up next. Looking at GN, last week's candlestick was a hanging man or a rejection to the downside. The previous week before that was a doji, so it could have gone either way this past week. We are really close to retesting this trend line that is drawn. It has not retested yet. Let's go ahead and adjust that just a little bit. So it's right on it. So that could be a retest before continuing upward. Let's go ahead and drop down to the daily time frame. Excuse me. I added in this trend line on the daily time frame. You can see last week, Thursday was rejection to the downside. Friday was bullish, and then the week or the days before that was kind of consolidating. We had that bullish engulfing candle, which price never got down below, never closed below. So there was your indicator that you should be looking for buys at the beginning of last week. Even though we had that bearish candlestick, it was not engulfing, and so we saw the price move upward because of that. Again, it did look like we have a retest of this trend line right here as well. Not quite a retest, but pretty close. Looking at the 4-hour time frame, same trend line drawn. All the trend lines are the same. I didn't add any zones or anything like that. No support and resistance levels. We're just going off of trend lines on this pair. So if we do see bullish movement out the gate, we're looking for break and a retest and then continuation upward, which is kind of what I expect. This is, if you will, a flag pattern. I'll kind of show it better. So usually, for those of you that don't know how flag patterns work, this is what we consider to be the pole of the flag. So price goes up, consolidates in this flag pattern, and then what we expect to happen, is we expect for price to continue the same way it came in. So in this case, it would be bullish. So that's where we are expecting it to go. That's the way that flag patterns generally go. However, like I said in the previous pair, we are if-then traders, and so we wait for confirmation in either direction. So that's what I see for GN this week. Pretty simple pair. We're just waiting for either breaks and retests or rejections of either one of these trend lines before we get in. So that's it for GN. Let's go ahead and move on. Next up is AUD USD, Aussie versus the US dollar. You can see last week's candlestick was bullish engulfing, and engulfed the previous 3 weeks worth of candlesticks. However, we do have this controlling candle, this bearish engulfing candle right here that is controlling, but price finally reacted off of this this supply or excuse me, support and resistance level, not supply and demand, which is honestly, it's just based off of all of this rejection right here of price rejected for many weeks. You can see it over here as well. And so we were expecting for some sort of rejection right there. And if we wouldn't have seen some sort of rejection, we would have seen some sort of large bearish engulfing candle that would have broke through, I suspect would have broke through this trend line down here. But that's what we see for the weekly time frame. That bullish engulfing candle from last week is significant. Looking at the daily time frame, I added this trend line, which you can see price on Friday rejected this trend line pretty hard. However, Thursday and Wednesday candles were pretty insignificant Tuesday was that huge bullish engulfing candle, which engulfed a pretty sizable amount. We're waiting for price to break these levels. However, it would not surprise me if we saw some bearish movement out of the gate because of this huge rejection, this huge pin bar on this trend line that is drawn. Let's go ahead and drop down to the 4 hour. And looking at the 4 hour, here's where things get even more interesting with AU, is that the rejection on the daily candlestick on Friday looks like a rejection of this trend line, but if you look at it on the 4 hour time frame, it looks like a break and a retest. And so we're kind of waiting to see if price is going to go bearish or if price is going to go bullish on this, because honestly I can see it going either way. The daily says it's going to go bearish, the 4 hour time frame says it's going to go bullish, and so we're waiting. If it does go bullish, we're looking for a retest of this zone, which is based off of previous market structure. If it goes bearish, then we're looking for it to come back down and retest that support and resistance level that I was talking about on the weekly. That's what I see for AU this week. Let's go ahead and keep it moving. GBP JPY is up next. As we know, GJ has been consistently driving me crazy. So this week I've adjusted the trend line finally, because I'd had enough of price dancing on the trend line that I've had for the previous 10 weeks. Or 9 weeks, I guess. The past 9 weeks I've had the same trend line on the weekly time frame. I finally adjusted it because we had all of this bearish movement when I was expecting it to go, or all of this bullish movement, excuse me, when I was expecting it to go bearish. But right now we are having a retest of this trend line drawn on the weekly time frame that has been drawn for the previous 10 weeks, for this week being the 10th week. I've also added another trend line that's based off of these 2 points and this point right here. So these 3 points, so we've got 2 trend lines down below now. This one, which was readjusted, and then this one, which I added this week, as well as the top of the channel. This horizontal ray right here is based off of market structure right here, and that's it. So let's go ahead and drop down to the daily time frame. Looking at the daily time frame, Thursday's candle was a bullish engulfing candle. Friday's candle was a pin bar off of that weekly time frame that I was talking, or that weekly trend line, excuse me, that I was talking about. So that leads me to believe that we should, or we could possibly see some bearish movement. Let's go ahead and see where we are on a Fibonacci retracement right here. And that was it was a rejection of the 70.7 as well. So we should see, I'm expecting to see some bearish movement, but I've been saying that for almost a month now, and it has not yet come to fruition. We do have this bullish engulfing candle, which does signify that there is bulls, there are buyers in the market. However, that large pin bar on the weekly trend line and the rejection of the 70.7 are all reasons to think it's going to go bearish. But we're going to wait for confirmation before we get on any bearish movement, because this has been trending upward for many days now. Looking at the 4 hour time frame, this is where it's again just like we saw with I believe it was AU or GN, just like we saw with that one pair, where on the daily time frame it looks like it could go bearish, on the 4 hour time frame it looks like it could go bullish. So we're waiting to see. We can see I have these 2 channels drawn, or this one channel drawn. This is the bottom of the channel, this is the top. Price broke out of the top of the channel and now currently is sitting right on the top of that channel. And so we could see bullish momentum. That could be just a retest of that channel before it goes bullish. However, we do have that weekly time frame that I keep referring to that was just retested, and so we could see this go bearish as well. We're kind of in a funny spot with GJ, and so I'm going to wait for a clear-cut direction before I get into anything on GJ. Just because there's a whole bunch of different options for GJ right now. I know I only have, well, there's only 2 options, right? It's either going to go bullish or bearish, but there's a bunch of different reasons why it could go either one of those directions, and so I am going to wait for clear-cut direction with GJ. What I'm looking for is either a break and a retest of the weekly trend line before going bullish, and I have my take profit set for previous market structure. Or if we see it go bearish, we're looking for a significant bearish candle, a retest of the channel before coming down and retesting the bottom of the channel that is drawn. Now that's what I see for GJ this coming week. Let's go ahead and keep it moving. All right, next up is EJ. EJ on the weekly time frame. Last week's candlestick was bullish, pretty sizable bullish candlestick. And so that's just continuing from the previous 2 weeks. We're seeing some sort of retracement off of the bearish movement we saw for almost 2 months prior to that. I've got these support and resistance levels drawn. I've got a few trend lines drawn as well. Price isn't really close to any of those currently. Let's go ahead and drop down the daily time frame. I added a trend line on the daily time frame. It'll be more prominent on the 4-hour time frame, but just kind of to see where price could go. Friday's candlestick was pin bar to the downside. Thursday and Wednesday candlesticks weren't all that significant, but Tuesday's candlestick was this huge bullish engulfing candle, or sizable. I shouldn't say huge, but it was pretty large. And so I'm going to wait for this candlestick to be broken before selling it. Even though we could see a break in this trend line, I want this bullish engulfing candle to be broken before I sell it. Let's take a look and see where we are on the retracement of this. And that is, it's broken the 38.2 and retested it, and we don't have a rejection of any other level. So I think that there's still more room to the upside for this. This market structure, this horizontal line right here, support or supply and demand zone, lines up with the 61.8 pretty well, and so we could see retracement all the way up to the 61.8. So yeah, I would definitely wait for confirmation before selling this. Let's go ahead and drop down to the 4-hour time frame. I added a zone. It's based off of market structure on the 4-hour time frame. We can see the price broke out of that, and now looks like it's retesting that zone before continuing to go bullish. However, like I said, if we do get a break of this trend line and a break of this zone and a retest of the zone and or the trend line, then we would be comfortable selling it to this trend line down here. If not, we're looking for it to, again, retest this market structure up here, which is right around the 61.8 retracement of this leg. So that's what I see with EJ this week. Let's go ahead and move on to UCAD. All right, moving on to UCAD, we have last week's candlestick being a strong bearish candlestick engulfing this candlestick right here, this bullish, previous bullish candlestick, which is significant. We are approaching the B point, which I should mark with a horizontal line, the B point of the bat pattern. And for those of you that have been watching all 10 weeks worth of videos, you'll know that I started out putting a lot more emphasis on harmonic patterns, but I don't trade that way necessarily. I like to be aware of harmonic patterns, but I don't necessarily trade specifically just off of harmonics. I place much more emphasis on technicals, technical analysis, and candlestick analysis. Which is why I've kind of shifted away from talking about harmonics so much as I do everything else. So those of you that were wondering why I haven't been hitting on harmonics nearly as much, that's the reason why. I'm a firm believer that harmonics are good to be aware of. It's good to know that those are in play. But if you trade just strictly harmonics, you could end up hurting yourself. Which is why I like having the larger time frame harmonics up there, because it shows where price is likely to go in the future. But I don't put a huge emphasis on it unless we're getting close to completion of harmonics, and you might see me talking more and more about them. Specifically the ones on the weekly time frame. As we get close to completing harmonic patterns on the weekly time frame, I'll spend more time talking about them. But until that happens, I won't spend a whole bunch of time talking about them, even though I did to start out with. That's not really how I trade, and so I didn't want to give some false bravado of the way that I do things, which is why I've kind of switched it up and gone more technical analysis, because that's what I emphasize in my trading. But back to UCAD, again, last week's candlestick was another strong bearish candlestick. We've seen bearish movement now for a number of weeks, and I do expect some sort of retest of the B point of the bat pattern, if not a retest of this trend line that's drawn down here. Dropping down to the daily time frame, I added a bunch of levels that will be more prominent on the 4-hour time frame than they are on the daily. However, some of these are relevant. This zone is drawn off of a 4-hour candlestick, so but it does look like that we're getting a rejection of that zone on the daily time frame, which is why I left it in. We do have this strong bearish candlestick. I believe that was Tuesday. Tuesday was that bearish, very strong bearish candlestick. Monday's bearish candlestick was also very strong. So we had a lot of movement on Monday and Tuesday, and then not a lot of movement on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Let's go ahead and drop down to the 4 hour. So I know that I just talked about harmonics, but for those of you that don't know anything about harmonics or don't spend a lot of time, don't put a lot of emphasis on harmonics, I do recommend that you look into reading about head and shoulders, because it's something that you can see all the time, either head and shoulders or inverted head and shoulders. You can see very, very often in charts, and they, as long as the neckline is broken, they almost always work out. And so while you don't have to learn bat patterns and butterfly patterns and crab patterns and Gartley's and all of that, you don't have to learn about those, but I would spend some time understanding the way that head and shoulders work because of stuff like this. We saw it on EA, we're seeing it again on UCAD, where we have these head and shoulders. Once the neckline is broken, then usually in the case of a head and shoulders, price will completely disintegrate after the break of the neckline, the break and the retest of the neckline, and or adversely on an inverted head and shoulders, you'll see price skyrocket after the break of the neckline. So that's definitely something that I do recommend putting some time and effort into learning more about if you don't already know about it. It is kind of a simple concept, right? You have a left shoulder ahead and a right shoulder. Same thing with the inverted. And then you look for a break of the neckline. The neckline is this trend line down here. But that's enough about that. Looking at the 4 hour time frame, the zone that I was talking about is based off of this candlestick right here, which is based off of market structure. And then we have all of these levels that price could travel to. And so if we see bullish movement come out the gate, all of these levels are based off of previous market structure. So we can see price reach and then turn on either one of these levels, whether it be below where price is or above where price is. We do have the double bottom in the zone drawn right now, though, and so I'm not real sure. Friday we ended with the bullish engulfing candle, not the last candlestick of the day, but the second of the last candlestick for that day. So that bullish engulfing candle, it still is not all that significant compared to all the bearish movement that we had right here. So maybe draw a consolidation box around that and trade the breakout of that. Just be aware of the levels coming after either above or below where price is. So that's what I see with UCAD this week. Moving on to the 10th pair. And looking at GU now, 10th pair of the week. Last week's candlestick was a bullish engulfing candlestick, which is in currently all of these wicks, all of these rejections from previously. So that's a good sign for the completion of this bat pattern. The horizontal ray right here signifies previous market structure where we saw that large rejection at first, and then I have a couple of trend lines drawn. They've been drawn for quite some time. Dropping down, we can see that last week's candlesticks were all bullish. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday all ended green, even though Wednesday's was a little bit of a pin bar. Thursday came through and engulfed that entire rejection. And so I have this ray based off of market structure. I have this ray based off of market structure and these trend lines. So I expect this to continue to go bullish. We may see a little bit of a retracement since, again, this previous market structure right here, which is why that ray is drawn. We might see a little bit of a bearish movement, maybe even a retest of this trend line before continuing bullish. But if we do get a break and a retest of previous market structure, I do expect this to continue to go upward. Dropping down to the 4 hour time frame. Another one of these, I don't know if it's just GBP pairs that are doing this, but we have this breakout and then a retest, perfect retest of market structures. So it does look like this is going to continue going bullish. However, if it does break down below this this ray that is drawn, then be aware that it can go bearish and that it very well could even retest this trend line before continuing to go upward. But right now, I'd say GU looks good to continue its upward trend. So that's what I got for GBP USD. And that's it for this week.